Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special discussion of the issues in the 4th Legislative District Senate race in Spokane Valley. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons, and we have two candidates of the three that are running with us today. John Roskally was unable to make this event, but our two candidates are the incumbent, Senator Mike Padden, a Republican, and Marie Danimus. Okay, it's Danimus. I wanted to be sure I was getting that right. She is an independent candidate, all right? The format is very simple. This is a discussion, not really a formal debate. We're not going to be, pinching time that much in this process. We're going to let the candidates tell you what they think about things. And I think we should start with one understanding. Much of what's going to happen in the legislative session upcoming, unprecedented, is going to arise from the experiences we're going through now with COVID-19. So many of the questions that I will be asking about issues that existed before that time but are now affected by that will be kind of the direction that we're going to go with these areas of exploration today. So with that, we'll introduce our candidates. Anne-Marie.
Thank you. As a Marcom professional and business development specialist, my job is to create policy, and to grow business. I can do that for Washington State. I have 38 years of community service experience, and I'm at my best when I'm in service to the public. It would be my honor to do that in the legislature, and I will bring my A game. If you feel like you don't have a voice in Olympia, there's 3 reasons for that: McCaslin, Shea, and Senator Patton. There are 2 GOPs in the 4th District, buyer beware. Mr. Patton was a faithless elector. As a judge, he played favorites, choosing a friend which cost the people almost $4 million. His client, your pocketbook. He supports the Liberty State, and he has continually endorsed Mr. Shea, which has brought a negative reputation to this area. We need new ideas, we need accountability, and we need change. If you wanted to be heard, you need a new voice. I'm that voice. Thank you.
All right, Senator Padden.
Yes, I'm Senator Mike Padden. I've had the privilege and honor of representing you in the legislature since a special election in November of 2011. I came over to the Spokane area after high school to attend Gonzaga University, and then later went on to the law school. Found my wife, and we raised 5 children here and have lived in the same part of the valley over 40 years. So I think I have a pulse on what the feelings are for the people of the Spokane Valley, and frankly, some of the remarks that were just made are not correct, but I don't want to go into those right now. What I want to let you know is that I've been able to work for you by working in the majority and in the minority, and also being able to work with folks of both parties. You never want to burn any bridges when you're in the legislature, because you never know. Your opponent on one issue today may be somebody who's an ally on another issue in the future. So I have the experience, I've been effective, I've been able to prime sponsor legislation that's passed, both in the majority and minority, and I'd like to continue working for you to make a difference, to try to better things for the folks of the 4th Legislative District.
All right, let's go to the first round, and it goes to you, Anne-Marie. Okay. Projections have it that we are going to be somewhere between $4 and $7 billion short in Washington State over the next couple of biennium. All right, and of course, the legislature is going to have to find ways to deal with that. Part of that is aggravated by the coronavirus experience and the economic impact thereof. But one of the things the Democrats are going to come, you as an independent, Mike Padden as a Republican, one of the things the Democrats are going to do is to seek to introduce, in a crisis situation, the need for new taxes, specifically an income tax. Do you support a state income tax?
Not currently, I certainly don't. And we have a constitutional issue with an income tax in this state. So they've got a legal challenge that they have to meet before they can do that. I think the most important thing that we can do first and foremost is to cut the fat. There are line items reductions that we can make across the board, and we also want to increase efficiency in the way that we are dealing with the current issues and then taking money and investing them in the areas that can help us grow the economy. I have several suggestions with regards to the B&O tax. For one, we need to waive B&O tax for all new small businesses under $10 million, gives them a chance to grow and thrive, and we need to create different tax brackets within our B&O system. The Democrats also are trying to target Amazon and Microsoft and those industries and tax them more, but that's short-sighted because 90% of the other people in that industry can't afford that. Our service industry in particular is hurting. I suggest we waive the bottle tax for services like restaurants, bars, caterers. Now, it sounds like, well, Anne Marie, that's more money going away. But if we lose those businesses, we'll lose vendor contracts, we'll lose rent, we'll lose jobs, we'll lose so much more. So if we help shore up the small businesses that were already hurting and are hurting more because of COVID, we line item cut the fat, we trim it a little, and we get creative about making government work in a cohesive system instead of all of these individual departments working unilateral. We need to cut, we need to trim, we need to economize and make it more efficient.
Senator Patton?
Yes, I do not I've never favored an income tax. I don't believe we need more taxes. Our budget has grown, even with these reductions by the governor's veto at the end of the last session, by 19%. And unfortunately, Mike, the governor, Senator Billig, and Representative Jenkins, who's the Speaker of the House, have resisted all our calls for a special session. We should have had a special session in June, and at that time we could have made reductions in the budget, which started July 1st, and new spending could have been stopped. There was a 3% pay raise for all state employees. So what does the governor do? He gives them a furlough, and then they can apply for unemployment. So they'll actually be making more money than they would have working. So, I mean, it's absolutely crazy. And at the same time, he's got just a disaster on his hands with the unemployment compensation. Miss Levine should have resigned or been let go. I mean, we had over $650 million we were the victim of, we lost because of the scam from Nigeria. And then they overreacted and were much too strict, going after the fraud, froze bank accounts, and have delayed. There were 80,000 people in the state who didn't get their unemployment compensation they had coming to them. So our office has been trying to help people deal with that, telling them where the food banks are, helping in other ways, and then trying to intervene so they can get the unemployment compensation they have. Some are really heartbreaking stories. But I mean, yes, I certainly agree with my worthy opponent as far as reform of the B&O tax. In fact, I introduced legislation to give new businesses a break on the B&O tax. Another area we should work on is when they had the reduction of the tax for Boeing as a large manufacturer, it should have been applied not just to Boeing, but to all the manufacturings across the board. And if we'd done that, it would have solved a number of problems. It would have helped these small manufacturers grow, but also would have allowed the European Union not to come after Boeing, which they did last session. And then the legislature, I did not vote for it, voted to increase the tax on Boeing so they could comply with the European Union, rather than reduce the manufacturing tax on the other folks. So there's a number of things that do need to be done in the way of tax reform, but we don't have a problem of not enough revenue. We have a problem of too much spending, and the legislature has not been able to distinguish between what they want and what they need.
All right, you have an opportunity for A summation,
Thank you.
Bernard.
Well, it certainly is always commendable to reach out to your community because I would, and you do, represent them not only in the legislature, but every day of the year. However, I think that it's a waste of time to complain and finger point about what people aren't doing. He had said in the 4th District GOP meeting, I'm not going to introduce any new legislation. That's not a way to approach problems. We shouldn't be applauding on the handful of times that people are reaching across the aisle. We should be doing it every single time. And I don't know why that particular policy didn't go through, but there is a tug of war constantly, tug of war. And the people that are getting drugged through the mud, it's the people that are getting drugged through the mud. It's not red team, blue team, it's red, white, and blue team. And we need to all get in this together and find the way. We all want to cut and make more efficient government, but we can't just talk about it and fight about it. We actually have to make strategic plans to do that and bring people on board to move us forward. That's what I've done in my personal life, in my business life, is to go and find experts, bring people together, and work forward for real solutions that everyone can get behind. You do that by appealing to the majority and not forgetting the minority.
Just as an appendage to that last question for both of you, you as an independent are going to be overwhelmed by the fact that the Democrats run both the House and the Senate, and you as a Republican, the same situation. What can you do to actually affect anything in the outcome with those kinds of numbers?
Well, I mean, there's still a lot you can do. You work with other people, you maintain a good relationship with folks, and you have input. Now, sometimes they will listen to you, sometimes they won't. I did want to briefly go back to the last question. It's simply not true that I said I would not introduce legislation. That's not correct. In fact, I've always introduced legislation the 14 and a half years I was in the House, and since I've been in the Senate. And not only introduced, but I've been fortunate enough to pass a lot of legislation in the last 4 years. So anyway, but I think we do have to work together, and we have to present the arguments. We have to tell the folks, if we're ever going to have change, why it's not good to tax and not look after waste, fraud, and abuse. We have a system, our state agencies are not being well run by and large. There are some exceptions that are very good. Department of Revenue always does a good job of collecting the money. And I work with the Office of Public Defense in my capacity on the Law and Justice Committee. They're a well-run agency, but there's a lot of agencies that aren't. I just mentioned the Employment Security Division, which a disaster, the worst in the nation. We had more money that we were lost by the Nigerian scam artists than any other state. But there's a lot of things we can do, and there are, the Democrats aren't monolithic. So there's individual Democrats that might agree with us on an issue, and sometimes you can cobble enough to get a majority. So you always gotta be working, and you gotta try to persuade people.
It's possible that you were misquoted by the Spokesman Review, but there was little quote numbers saying that you had no plans on introducing new legislation in the next term. So I haven't heard about any of it, but there is some that I'm sure we will hear about it. But with regards to the original question, I won't be overwhelmed because I don't have to reach across the aisle. I am the aisle. I am a moderate, and I am always looking for the best ideas, not my idea or his idea. And it's not sometimes they listen to you. Of course they're listening. They're representing their people. We're not talking to or at people. We're sitting down at a table and we're negotiating. We're listening to everyone, putting ideas on the table, sorting through them, and finding the best path. That's how you move forward. This team back and forth is getting us nowhere. And certainly if you've spent a lot of time and you've drafted legislation and you think it's the right way, then you don't walk in with your tail between your legs. You present it and you demonstrate why it's a great idea. I've been working in marketing. Maybe I have a little bit of an edge on that because I do write terms and the Democrats are terrible at marketing. But from that perspective of walking into the legislature with "you're outnumbered." No, I'm not. I am not outnumbered. Everyone in that room is a Washingtonian. And I'll walk in there believing that they all want what is best for the people, like what I want is best for the people. And I don't have a national party agenda, if you will. I have a 4th district agenda. I have spent the last 6 months doing research. I do a lot of statistical analysis as a marketing executive. I listen to a lot of experts. I look at the situation at hand and I look for the best answers. And I don't care where those answers come from. I want what's best for the people. That's what I will support. That's what I will pursue. That's what I'll vote for.
All right, the next question deals with law enforcement and law and order policy. All right, in many communities, we've all seen this in the last few weeks. Violence, looting, property damage has occurred, and citizens are appalled at what they see. And particularly, they are appalled by the fact that nobody ever seems to pay a price for this. That there are not usually very many arrests. Those that are turned loose, and seldom do they ever see a courtroom after that. And thus there is no prosecution of a lot of these illegal and criminal deeds. Do you favor, Senator, aggressive prosecution of these offenders?
Yes, I think we're very fortunate here in Spokane County to have Larry Haskell as our prosecutor, and he generally is an aggressive prosecutor. We had rioting and looting in Spokane. Fortunately, the mayor of Spokane, the sheriff, Ozzie Knesevich, they got together, the police chief, Chief Meidel, and did I think a very good job in getting on top of it. Unlike Seattle, which is an unmitigated disaster, and you had a foreign country operating in the city of Seattle. And when people left that Chaz zone, they were told, go back to America. Can you believe it? And then they were able to leverage a reduction of $20 million in the Seattle police budget. Here at least the National Guard was called out, the sheriff had the helicopter, and there were peaceful protests on the Sundays after that. And I don't think anybody's opposed to peaceful protests. After all, that's part of our right as Americans. And so that worked out here much better. But those people that did loot, I think there was maybe one prosecution, if I remember correctly. But in general, I think Prosecutor Haskell and law enforcement, both the sheriff and the Spokane police, did an admirable job.
All right, your thoughts?
Civil disobedience is different than looting, for sure. When someone commits an act of civil disobedience, they are knowingly and purposely breaking the law to make a point. We see examples of this where people have chained themselves to trees or have sat in particular areas. But you make that decision for yourself. You make the decision that I'm going to break the law, and if I pay the price for it, I will stand on that. And I will say, I feel about this so strongly that I will break the law to make a point. And then there's people who just want to tear things up. They want to take advantage of a situation. And these people who have come in and destroyed cities, and I'm not talking about people who maybe are just so angry and torn apart that they do something maybe they later regret. I'm talking about like hooligan style violence. Everyone needs to be held accountable to the law. But it is interesting to me that Senator Patton is pointing out CHOP and Chaz and how they go back to America, but he was refused to speak out against Representative Shea and his alleged crimes. I don't equate what started out as kind of a peaceful hippie idea turned into an unmitigated mess. And there were not, the investigations are still going on, of course, and the FBI is still looking into Armand Bundy and all of the people that took over that area in Oregon that we all know that there's a lot of empirical evidence to suggest that Mr. Shea's involvement was outside of the law. But he's mentioned Chaz or CHOP, whatever it's called, several times, but has remained silent on this. Yes, I believe that people who break the law, but that means everyone is held to that standard. They're our rights, not my rights. I know my rights, my rights. They are our rights. The next time you say, I know my rights, say, I know our rights. You are one people amongst all of us, we the people, and we should all be held accountable for our actions. Whether or not you are on the far, far right or the far, far left, when you break the law, you will be held responsible.
Yeah, I would just like to point out that Representative Shea is not running for the Senate. I'm running for the Senate. I also would point out that there was an investigation that the House of Representatives did. I'm in the Senate. I'm not in the House of Representatives. And they didn't do anything. They could have censored Representative Shea. They could have expelled him. They didn't do any of that. In fact, Representative Shea has never even been charged with anything. So I do think there's due process still in this country, and you're presumed innocent until you're proven guilty. And he deserves that right. But he's not running this time. He's not on the ballot. I'm accountable for what I do, and I'm happy to be accountable for what I do or don't do. And I would point out, however, that the events in Seattle are awfully serious. There were people killed. There were innocent black teenagers that were killed. And the mayor of Seattle didn't even have the courtesy to call. And yet President Trump called and offered his condolences to the father of one of the victims. But we cannot allow that to happen. It went on and on and on. So I think, in fact, there is legislation. Senator Oban has legislation that would say cities that do not provide police protection for their citizens should have a reduction in some of the state funding that goes to them. And I would support that legislation. But I do want to draw the contrast between Seattle and Spokane. And I think it was pretty dramatic. I think overall the folks did a good job in Spokane. There were a few people that hijacked a peaceful protest and caused it. And some of them perhaps were with Antifa, and they've been active in other cities. They still have major problems going on in Portland, Oregon. So we have to be concerned about this. And we have to look at it in a balanced way. And again, I think Spokane did a good job.
All right, on to a question having to do with public education policy. Given the economic damage that has been done by coronavirus, many families are not in a position as we move into the fall term to be able to afford tuition costs to go to college in the state of Washington, as well as virtually every state in the union, and that means revenue losses for the universities, the colleges, and even the community college districts. As a Washington state senator, what are you prepared to do about that?
And that question's to me?
That goes to you, yes.
Well, I think that in that problem, there also oddly lies an answer. Because a lot of our children have had to go home in order to study. And the idea that we're going to be able to throw open the doors to schools and allow everyone to resume their education as they normally do may not happen. And so I am normally never someone who wants to cut education, because an educated public is the first defense for a strong domestic policy. It prepares us to be in the workforce. The gal at Jack in the Box can count your change back. But I think that there is a solution inside of that where we have to adjust the way that we're teaching, the way that we have. And a lot of colleges gave refunds on their room and board and whatnot. We're going to have to do the same thing in the school system that we're doing in government. And that is to trim the areas that we can by possibly continuing to keep some students home, opening up online education, which has a lower cost threshold, and look for solutions to keep kids educated, keep them engaged.
Are you referring to college students? Because that's what I was referring to.
Yes, that too, because of tuition, you can lower tuition Oftentimes when you take classes online, you certainly don't have the cost of room and board, and there's not as much, a cost involved in housing all of those children and providing. So in an odd way, and we have been preparing ourselves by these teachers having to change the way that they teach, we can kind of take what we've had to do and apply that to a partial solution to keep some kids going in the system.
What about those courses that require labs and those, you can't teach those at home?
Well, certainly, and that would be, it would be line item decision. I mean, different kinds of education. I mean, we were talking about, both of us, in broadcasting. I mean, you need to have some hands-on experience in order to complete your education. And we're going to have to make decisions, they'll have to make decisions as a university and then department to department on what they can do inside. We can offer these classes online and reduce a certain amount of costs. I mean, I looked into getting an MBA at one point, and I could do the majority of the course from my home, and then at two different times I would have to go to the university and study for a short amount of time. So I think that if we get creative and we bring in some new ideas about education, that we can also trim the budget.
All right, Senator, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we have to look at our whole system. We don't know whether there will be classes on campus or not. We hope there will be, and the colleges are preparing for that. And if there isn't, there are some reductions in costs you could have by online classes. But I think we've also got to look at the administrative costs at our public universities. You compare them to the administrative costs of private colleges, and they're a lot higher. So I think, there's administrative positions, a lot of provosts and assistant provosts and other things that maybe could be reduced. And then we have to look, are all our colleges functioning properly? There's one that isn't. The Evergreen State College in Olympia has been the scene of all sorts of problems. They're the highest cost per student of any of the universities, and frankly, I think they could be closed, and we could save money there, and folks could go to other places. I mean, our other four-year institutions like Eastern, Central, Western, they produce a much better product than we get out of Evergreen. That's one idea. But overall, we're going to have to look at some cost-cutting measures. One thing that we were able to do when we had the majority in the legislature was reduce tuition. We even had a year where there was no increase in tuition at WSU, and it was really something to go and see, say, a high school student and say, you're going to be able to go to college and it's not going to cost you or your family as much. And it made the difference between some people being able to go to college and not. Of course, you want to increase scholarships and other things. And, I certainly believe in educational choice. And there's certain things that could be done that way also to make college less expensive.
Follow-up.
We have barely caught up since the cuts that we made in education in 2015 after the recession. That's not that far in the rear view mirror. And of course I like scholarships, and of course I like reducing costs. The federal government has pulled a lot of the support, and they have relied more on the states to come up with funds. The taxing is unequal. I mean, especially when we're talking about K through 12. The legislature recently passed another bill to open access to the double study program where you're gaining college credits. I'd like to see training, apprenticeships also happen. For those kids who aren't four-year college bound, we can create apprenticeships so they also can learn a trade that is going to help them pay their rent and feed their families. But we are in the middle of a budget crunch, and I think that the idea there's any money to be found there is, as much as I'd love to do it, I don't think that's really the reality that we're looking at right now. And if we are able to throw open open the doors, and it doesn't look like that's going to happen, then, we'll have to do some more thinking about that. But I do think we need a little more information about what it is we're actually dealing with, and these conversations now, looking at all of the things that could happen, having a game that we can play as we move forward so we're ready. Part of the reason that COVID hit us so hard is that we weren't ready. We know school is going to be opening. We know people are hurting financially, so let's get ready. Let's put on our uniform and get ready to play, because it's a new game out there.
All right, let's stay on education and go through, you mentioned K through 12 a couple of times. Let's go with K through 12. All across the nation, states are wringing their hands about whether or not to open schools, K through 12 schools in the fall. They're concerned about the health aspects, obviously, of the situation. All the recent data seems to indicate that young people are less likely to catch COVID than anybody else, and almost not likely to pass it on to anyone else. And then we have a report just came out earlier this week from the experts, the American Pediatric Society, saying that if you keep kids home from school, from in-classroom experiences, that they're going to actually suffer psychological harm greater than the overall medical harm that COVID-19 is dishing out on them. Do you favor opening the schools in Washington State this fall?
Yes, I do, Mike. I think it's important that we do that. The American Academy of Pediatrics also indicated that the social distancing for children could be at 3 feet, not 6 feet. So I think there are things that can be done, and I think most of us would agree in-person learning, especially K-12, is preferable. My worthy opponent was correct in that the OSPI was not ready for online learning on the scale. And there were so many students that simply didn't participate. So at least in the Valley, in the Central Valley, West Valley, East Valley area, there were 30-40% of the kids that did not participate in online learning. The school districts did a good job of getting the food and getting meals out to children, but the online learning, we weren't ready for that. So I think in-person learning is what we know, and I think unless there's just absolutely a complete spike that's way beyond what we see now, that we should open the schools in the fall.
I hope we can do that. I think we all look forward to that. I know parents want that. They definitely, not only just to get them out of your hair, but also too in the sense of it makes it difficult, because if you can't open schools, then you can't open daycares. But I don't think that we should just open schools because. You don't win a game of dodgeball by standing in the middle of the court, or you have to take the information in as it comes. And so as much as I would love to say, yes, I'm in favor of it, I do hear the science. I lean towards experts in the field and not just my own opinion. But I think we proceed with caution. If we can do that, yes, let's do it, because it's going to be hugely beneficial, not just to our children, but also to our economy, because we're going to have a problem if we have to have one parent stay home. It would be nice if we lived in an economy where parents could make that choice to have one parent stay home with the kid, and that's not our economic reality. Our economic reality has shifted dramatically, and getting kids back in school is not only good for them, it's good for all of us, but I don't think we can do that just based on that. A long time ago, parents only taught kids, and there are a lot of different ways to learn. I've been an extracurricular teacher since I was in my early 20s, and there are valuable lessons to be learned and ways to educate yourself, sometimes that work even better and prepare you better for life than reading, writing, and arithmetic. So I think that we have to look at not just schools, but educating children on a whole. Maybe we have to change our game plan and think a little bit outside of the box to make it happen. But I do support it, as long as it does prove to be safe, because these kids go home to grandma and grandpa too. So let's proceed with caution for sure.
We're definitely going to have to make a decision, and we're going to have to make a decision fairly quickly. And the reason I favor opening the schools is that the evidence is, as you indicated, Mike, that the younger students are the ones least likely to get the COVID. I realize we also have to be concerned about the teachers and the staff there. So I don't say we don't do it with caution, but we do it as safely as we can. And that seems to be the situation right now as we tape this program. If the situation was to change dramatically, then you could re-examine it. But if you had to make a decision today, I would say we open them.
All right. In time, this question goes to you. In time, the economy in our area will stabilize. It inevitably will. This will all be in the rearview mirror, one would hope. And it will be necessary then to continue to manage population growth and expansion of our communities across the state of Washington, and to provide for some measured policy that would work best for all of the parties in interest with respect to that. What will you bring to that conversation with respect to growth management?
Growth management is exceedingly important. We have a homeless and housing issue. We have growing urban areas that possibly require support and annexation. We have an infrastructure problem. I mean, this Hicks argument, it's Hicks, I think, isn't that correct, with over the water and property rights going back and forth and back and forth. We've been talking about, I really think the key to that is infrastructure. Housing relates to density, density relates to infrastructure. You can't build, if you go to the planning department, you can't build unless they do a measurement on how much our infrastructure can handle. We've all hit a pothole in this town, and these are jobs programs. But in order to not have issues in the future, we need to look at doing it in different ways. We need to combine infrastructure and green technology to move us forward in growth. If we keep building in the manner in which we build, we're going to continue to do damage to our environment. And I don't know how you were raised, but I was raised that if you make a mess, you clean up after it. 40 years ago, we should have been planning in this way. The time to start was yesterday, but the time to really focus on it is now. We have to focus on growth in a way that's not going to continue to damage us. And green policy doesn't just mean the environment, it also means money. Infrastructure is a jobs program in disguise, and if we do it in the right way, we can move forward and not continue to damage our environment.
Just as a follow-up, do you see this as a state function or as a county-by-county function? Should there be opt-out capability for counties that don't want to participate in state mandates?
Well, I mean, I think that's an issue-by-issue question in the sense of opting out. But I think it depends on which system you're talking about specifically. I mean, if your water is managed, like I live in Pasadena Park, irrigation district. I think that when it comes to general environmental concerns and the way that we're going to build and grow Washington State, then yes, that needs to be a state mandate. But I think that municipalities definitely need to have some autonomy in how they do that and how they manage it. I mean, every community is structured differently, all of them, of course, answering to the state. But I think that broad-based and incentive programs, for sure, to encourage development and to encourage growth. I mean, we haven't received the money that we should, and when it comes to development, I mean, they're running out of room in Seattle. They're squished in there. I'm certainly not encouraging a massive influx of people here, but building out in wealth and better development, I think we could take a lead in that.
Senator, your thoughts on this?
Well, my thoughts are that the Growth Management Act, when it was originally passed, was probably overly prescriptive. And since that time, the legislature has taken actions in a number of sessions. A number of the smaller counties are able to opt out of the Growth Management Act. I've worked very closely with the cities in the 4th Legislative District, the city of the Spokane Valley, Liberty Lake, Millwood, and with the county on some of these issues. I've helped with providing funding to improve the water quality at Newman Lake. There's a number of different issues. We've had issues with some of the water purveyors. Were rather unique in that the city of the Spokane Valley doesn't have any water rights, but we have a lot of irrigation districts like Pasadena, Moab, Vera, Modern, a whole number of them. And we've been able to work with the Department of Ecology and ensure that there are water rights for the future. One of the things that we are so blessed with in the Spokane Valley is an aquifer that is maybe the best in the world, certainly one of the top aquifers, and we need to protect it, but we also need to realize that there's a lot of water. It's very interesting. I mean, in some places the river feeds into the aquifer, in some places the aquifer feeds into the river. With regard to the housing, there's an issue that I've pushed, and I'm pushing hard and want to continue to push. We had 23 co-sponsors in the Senate, so it was a bipartisan bill to make it easier for first-time buyers to purchase condominiums. Right now, there is excessive regulations, especially on smaller condominiums. So the bill would have said for 6 units and less, they would have the local regulations, but they wouldn't have the regulations under the State Condominium Act, which add about $200,000. The same unit as a townhouse is $200,000 less than if it's a condominium. So hopefully that will get more momentum, because I mean, I think it's fine to have a lot of apartments, but we've seen a tremendous growth in apartments in the valley. And a lot of those people would like to have home ownership. I think there's tremendous benefits of home ownership. And if some of those could be converted into condominiums, or there's incentives for new construction for entry-level condominiums, such as they have in Idaho and other states, I think we'd be much better off.
All right, a follow-up from you on that question.
Well, I mean, there's certainly no argument that most Americans would own a home. And that is the foundation of most individual wealth. If you own a home, that is typically the foundation of individual wealth. So yes, of course, we want to promote that, but you can't do it without proper infrastructure. I mean, and the comment that I made earlier about it depends on what we're talking about is just that. I mean, aquifers are dying all over the world. It's a global crisis. And I don't think it's just a matter of, oh, well, we have enough now because we had more before, and now when you parcel that out, we don't have as much. We need to be planning for the future when we do that. And certainly opting out with reason. I mean, if your particular situation, if your environment is not conducive to a state level policy, then you would opt out. But if we're trying to do both things, if we're trying to grow and we're trying to grow in a responsible way, it is up to the state to set those guidelines. Smaller communities maybe need a little more incentives if we're going to raise up their level of green living as well. Because it's not just growth, it's responsible growth. And yes, we'd all like to have a home, but we can't do that without infrastructure. We have to do infrastructure in a responsible way.
All right, time is running out on us, so I have one last question for each of you. It's the same question, well, modified because you are the challenger and he is the incumbent. But Senator Padden, why should you be reelected to this office?
Well, I think I bring a perspective that is reflective of the citizens of the 4th Legislative District. And we have a group of people that are in the Valley. They don't want to be, as a group, crammed in as much as other areas are, like the city of Spokane. They like to have a little extra elbow room. But I think I also know how a lot of them feel on issues and what they're concerned about. I was very involved, as were a lot of people in the Valley, in the efforts to qualify Referendum 90 for the ballot. And this gives the people a chance to vote on one of the worst pieces of legislation I've seen since I've been in the legislature. That's a mandatory graphic K-12 sex education bill that's dictated from Olympia. There's, some curriculums, choices in curriculums, but they got to be approved by the bureaucrats in Olympia, and they freeze out all the local school districts and citizens who can impact the local school districts. We had the Central Valley School District, the West Valley School District, and Meade School District state publicly their opposition and asked the governor to veto the bill. He didn't do that, but we gathered signatures, and a lot of those signatures were gathered by people in the Spokane Valley, and I'm very proud of that. So we'll have a chance to vote on that in November to either reject or accept it. And referendums are a little strange. You get the signatures and you think, okay, I got signatures, you vote yes. Well, that's not the way it is. You're actually voting on the bill, which was in gross substitute Senate Bill 5395. And if you are opposed to that, you want to reject it. So I've been involved in that, and there was such an outpouring of support for that. I mean, we have the virus, we didn't have large gatherings, church services were closed, and yet 264,000 signatures were gathered around the state. No paid signature gatherers. And the other thing, very interesting, Mike, for the first time since Herbert Hoover, no initiative qualified because of the virus and the inability to gather signatures there. So to overcome all that shows the intensity, and I will also say there was more emails, more phone calls, more contact by voters on that issue than anything else. So in any event, I'm a fighter for the things that the 4th District believes in, and I would like the opportunity to continue fighting for you.
And Marie Danimus, why
Yes.
should the 4th District reject their incumbent and elect you?
Well, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again and expecting different results. You know, Mr. Padden has tried to separate the state in half. This is the first time he proposed it in 1980. And he's correct, he is not Mr. Shea, but he supports him. He has not spoken out, and no, he has not been charged, but they did censure him. They kicked him out of the caucus. They gave him an office in the basement, and he is essentially chased out of office because the people had said no. If he thinks that he has his finger on the pulse of the valley, he is mistaken. I am getting calls from both sides of the aisle, especially moderate Republicans, who say, what can I do to help? What can I do to help? There's 15 to 20,000 people who are far, far extremist right, and the rest of everyone does not want Mr. Patton to continue in his position as senator, and they are coming to me. I don't know where Mr. Ross Kelly is. He seems like a nice man, but he's kind of softballing this election. I think that this doesn't come down to one issue. You know, how we teach our children, what we teach our children, that's a very personal thing. The way that that bill reads allows parents on an individual basis to opt out of that education, although they are mandating that each district follow along with the state mandate. And we'll see what the people decide when that comes up for a vote. But I think it's important that you do not say, I understand what everyone thinks, when you just pursue one group, one people. You have to listen to everyone. Everyone has a voice in their district, and they should carry that voice into the legislature. And it's not just about the majority, it's about the minority as well, and how everyone believes and thinks. You are what you support. You are what you support. And he has continually supported these people who are attempting to raise arms against American citizens and create their own sovereignty. I have copies of the documents. He is number 2 on the list after McCaslin. And he refuses to speak out about it. Just saying I'm not him and he hasn't been charged isn't enough. We all know who Mr. Shea is, and they are both in bed together. We need to move forward by leaving these guys behind.
That does it. As far as time is concerned, time has expired, and we appreciate both of you, Senator Mike Padden and Marie Danimus, for joining us today and discussing the issues. I'm Mike Fitzsimmons for Spokane Talks, and thank you for watching.